I want to invite you to turn in your Bibles, if you have them this morning, to the Gospel of Luke, Luke chapter 22. But rather than doing what I typically do and just kind of reading our text for the day, we're actually going to cover several passages through Luke chapter 22 and chapter 23. As we continue the series we've been on, we've called CROSSwalk, looking at some of those key moments in the life and in the ministry of Jesus, leading up to and kind of as a part of his suffering and his death on the cross, and really trying to learn from that lessons that we can apply in how we live everyday life. We've looked at things like, what do you do when you find yourself at a crossroads? How do you settle those significant crossroad decisions in your life? We've looked at what do you do when you have double-crossed someone, double-crossed Jesus, when you have denied him or disappointed him or failed him? And how do we respond in a way that is redemptive and gives us hope for the future? Today, though, we want to look at that ever-important question. Who is Jesus, really? Who do you really believe Jesus to be? And we want to look at that through the lens, actually, of three series of questionings that Jesus faced after his arrest. People trying to figure out who he was and whether or not he was really a threat to the order of the day. And use them maybe as a lens into the kinds of people who ask or are trying to answer, perhaps is a better way of putting it, the question, who is Jesus really? When Jesus is arrested, he's carted off to the house of the high priest, and he's questioned there by the council of the elders of the people, the chief priests, and the teachers of the law. And these people fall into a particular category of kind of person that I believe we find in our world today. It's the kind of person who has already decided the answer to the question. In that sense, the questions that they're asking are not really questions that seek to know the truth, but they've already decided what that looks like in their heart. Let me give you an example, maybe a funny kind of example, but it happens once in a while at our house that we're getting ready to head off to some evening activity, and I'll come downstairs after having gotten dressed, and my wife will kind of give a quick glance at me, and she'll kind of look, and then she'll ask this question: "You're not really going to wear that tonight, are you?" Now, I want you to understand the context here. I appreciate when my wife says that kind of question for me, because my response is immediately, well, no, I'm heading right back upstairs and going to put on something else. And the reality is that when she asked that question, she really wasn't asking a question. She'd already decided, in fact, that it probably wasn't a good idea that I wear that tonight, but she asked it, or she communicated that in the form of a question. I have been deeply grateful on many occasions for that question that came from my wife's lips. But it reminds me of people who may be asking questions, but they've really already decided what they think about something. And this group of folks, the council of the elders of the people, the chief priests and the teachers of the law, when they question Jesus, they've pretty much already decided what they think about him. Look with me there at Luke chapter 22, beginning at verse 66. At daybreak, the council of the elders of the people, both the chief priests and the teachers of the law, met together, and Jesus was led before them. "If you are the Christ," they said, "tell us." And Jesus answered, "If I tell you, you will not believe me, and if I asked you, you would not answer. But from now on, the Son of Man will be seated at the right hand of the mighty God." And they all asked, "Are you then the Son of God?" And he replied, "You are right in saying I am." And then they said, "Why do we need any more testimony? We have heard it from his own lips." You see, the reality here wasn't that the chief priests and the teachers of the law were looking for the truth about who Jesus really was. They had already decided that he was a threat to their control of the religious order of the day. He was a threat to their authority in teaching. Jesus was someone we know from earlier in the narrative that they were seeking to eliminate. And with the help of Judas, what we looked at last week here at Vibe, they had sought to arrange a time when Jesus could be arrested and eliminated without inciting riots or problems among the people. Their mind was made up. They're not really looking for truth. And even Jesus' response here suggests to us that that was the fact, and that Jesus was well aware of it. Verse 67b, for example, Jesus answered, If I tell you, you will not believe me, and if I asked you, you would not answer. There are lots of folks out there in our world who have already made up their mind about who Jesus is. Now, they may ask questions, and their questions may be designed more as criticisms of the faith or of people who are crazy enough to follow this Christ. But they're not really looking to understand the truth. They've already made up their mind. We need to understand that there are times when we encounter folks who are just like that. But let me take that and turn it just a little bit closer to home. I wonder if there are times when many of us as well have made up our minds already about who Jesus is or what Jesus is like. And rather than really seeking to learn from His Word what is revealed about Him here, we just are looking for that which would confirm what we already think we know about Jesus. I think Jesus would rock our world at times if we were truly open to what He says. When Jesus says, "Take up your cross and follow me," what does that reveal about who Jesus really is? And how might that challenge our lives if we took that seriously? You get what I'm saying? I wonder, it's easy for us to criticize people, perhaps people like the teachers of the law and the chief priests here, who have already made up their mind about Jesus, but are there times when we're not that different? Times when we've already made up our mind about who He is, and we're unwilling to know the truth about Jesus. Folks who have already decided. There's another group of people here that are a fascinating bunch because they're interested to a point. They've not already decided, as was the case with the chief priests and the teachers of the law. But these are the folks who I like to say are seeking the truth. They're interested in the truth as long as, and you can kind of finish the sentence however you want, as long as it doesn't require something of them, as long as it doesn't require change in their life, as long as it doesn't require sacrifice, as long as it doesn't require them to submit to something different, as long as it doesn't impact them in a way that's inconvenient, then they're kind of interested in the truth. It's kind of like this. My doctor pointed out to me several months ago that my cholesterol level may be a little bit higher than would be good. And so his recommendation for me then is to begin to make some adjustments in my diet that would help to bring that level down closer to where one would really want it to be. Now, I had an initial interest in knowing more of the details about a diet like that, to a point. But there were certain things that you're not allowed to eat or you shouldn't eat if you're going to follow this diet. So it required change, and in some cases uncomfortable change, to the point that I began to realize that, man, most of what I was going to do was eat rabbit food. And I wasn't sure that I really wanted to do just that. I wasn't sure if I was, maybe the better way of saying it is, willing to do just that. In fact, the more I began to explore that and seek to learn more about it, it seemed to me that if it tasted good, then you couldn't eat it anymore. So I was really interested up to that point. I was interested in knowing more about that diet as long as it didn't require change or it wasn't costly to me. That kind of approach is exemplified in this story by the Roman governor Pilate. Because ultimately, the chief priests and the teachers of the law, after they've kind of determined that they want to take Jesus' life, they want to eliminate him from the picture, march him off to the Roman governor because they can't accomplish an execution legally without his declaring it to be the case as the Roman governor. And so they have to get Pilate to agree to this. So Pilate sits down with Jesus and begins to ask him questions about who he was and whether or not he really was the kind of threat that the chief priests and the teachers of the law had said that he was. So look with me there at Luke chapter 23, verses 1 through 5. That's where we pick up the story with this questioning from Pilate, the cross-examination that Jesus faces there. Then the whole assembly rose and led him off to Pilate, and they began to accuse him, saying, "We have found this man subverting our nation. He opposes payment of taxes to Caesar and claims to be Christ, a king." So Pilate asked Jesus, "Are you the king of the Jews?" "Yes, "It is as you say," Jesus replied. And then Pilate announced to the chief priests and the crowd, "I find no basis for a charge against this man." But they insisted. "He stirs up the people all over Judea by his teaching. He started in Galilee and has come all the way here." Now it gets a little bit interesting here because as the chief priests and the teachers of the law bring Jesus to Pilate, what they emphasize in terms of the charges against him are a little bit different than they were most concerned about. Keeping in mind that for them, the issue was whether or not Jesus was the Son of God, whether or not Jesus was the Christ. But now that they get him before Pilate, they need to at least direct those charges in such a way that Pilate is concerned enough that he sees also the need to eliminate Jesus as a threat. And so they make accusations like this man is subverting our nation, or this man opposes payment of taxes to Caesar, or he sets himself up as a king, someone whose authority would be in conflict with Jesus in all of that. Now Pilate asks him straight up, Are you the king of the Jews?" And Jesus' response is simply to acknowledge that that is the case. But Pilate sees in Jesus nothing that would require him to act in such a way as to direct his execution. And yet Pilate is nonetheless a bit taken by the threats that the chief priests and the teachers of the law still pose. And so Pilate is going to look for the way out because he doesn't want whatever he does with this Jesus guy to get in the way of his rule, of his maintaining order so that the emperor in Rome is pleased with where he is at in all of this. Pilate is seeking the truth about Jesus, but only to a point at which Jesus can be set aside and not require something more of him. Now that reminded me of something about another time in the ministry of Jesus, actually, where a man comes up to Jesus and is looking for some truth about what it means to follow him as long as it doesn't require change or transformation in his own life. We find it actually in Matthew chapter 19, beginning at verse 16. "Now a man came up to Jesus and asked, 'Teacher, what good thing must I do to get eternal life?' 'Why do you ask me about what is good?' Jesus replied. 'There is only one who is good. If you want to enter life, obey the commandments.' 'Which ones?' the man inquired. Jesus replied, 'Do not murder, do not commit adultery, do not steal, do not give false testimony, honor your father and mother, and love your neighbor as yourself. All these I have kept,' the young man said. 'What do I still lack?'" Now he asked the question, what do I still lack? And I believe that he was genuinely interested in knowing the truth about that, but only as long as it didn't require some kind of inconvenient or uncomfortable change on his part. Because then Jesus redirects him to a need in his own life. Verse 21, Jesus answered, "If you want to be perfect, go sell your possessions and give to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven. Then come, follow me." And when the young man heard this, he went away sad, because he had great wealth. See, the young man was interested in what it took to follow Jesus, as long as it didn't require some uncomfortable cost, some inconvenience on his part. Jesus, the Son of God, can see his heart, and he knows the hold that possessions and money have on his life. And so when Jesus challenges him at that point, we find the threshold at which this young man is not willing to cross. Now, we'll find people out there that are okay with the truth about Jesus as long as it doesn't impinge on their life, as long as it doesn't require some kind of uncomfortable change or inconvenient truth on their part. But I wonder at times too if the same isn't also true with us, that we selectively obey Christ and what he calls us to because we're interested in the truth of what it means to follow him as long as it doesn't require some uncomfortable change on our part, as long as it doesn't impinge on life as we want to have it. Is that true of you? I know it's true of me sometimes. And I think one of the ways that Pilate challenges us in his cross-examination of Jesus is to really begin to look at ourselves and to see When we look to understand the truth of Jesus in our times of study in His Word, or as we listen to the teaching that we get, are we truly open completely to what He would seek to teach us, the truth about Him? Or are we only open to that truth as long